Okay, good evening, gentlemen. I'd like to thank you for honoring us with your presence today. My name is David Shalita. I am a full-time libertarian activist in Israel. I've started my activism in 2011. Israel had a large Occupy Wall Street style protest going on in Israel. It was Israel's largest protest to date in all of Israel's history. The thing that was unique in that protest is that with Israel being a country that is so oriented towards the conflict, it was the first time that a large protest arose in Israel that was on the subjects of civil and society and economic issues. It was a protest where people opened up tents in a main boulevard in Tel Aviv in order to protest the rising prices of rent. And this is something, an economic society discussion is something that was highly uncharacteristic of Israeli activism. Ever since the 50s and 60s, the discussion was mostly revolving around the conflict. I found myself at that time. I used to be a right winger. I wouldn't go as far as saying that I was a conservative, if taking into account the fact that I knew very little about economic or social political issues. And at that stage, I lost my interest in the discussion around the conflict and started gaining interest in issues regarding the civil society. I began, at the time, there were the Republican primaries, the ones, if I'm not mistaken, before last, in which Ron Paul participated. And I saw by some kind of accident, I think in one of the debates, that there was a Republican candidate, and I had very superficial understanding of politics at the time, but he seemed, to my understanding, to run with a platform that I could strongly relate to. I said that here is a person who is a capitalist on the one hand, but on the other hand, as I quote, doesn't hate gays, and is not and is not pro-drug war, which is something, to my superficial understanding of the Republican Party in the early 2010s, was something that seemed to me very unusual. And thereafter, I discovered more about the Libertarian Party and the Libertarian movement. And I became more and more of a libertarian, in essence. I became active in a movement that was established during the social protests of 2011 by the name of the Israeli Freedom Movement. It is a movement that is oriented solely on economic and social issues and is not part of the conflict debate. And during my activity in that movement, I found that the movement mostly, in practice, is essentially a social club, which means that we found ourselves mostly socializing with other activists and just basically building a very strong social cycle and building our activism out of that. Now, as a natural continuity of the strong social aspect of our activism, we found that we appreciate the idea of living with other libertarian roommates, other members of that Israeli freedom movement, and we found ourselves establishing several of these flat shares in which we would live only activists, only libertarian activists, and use that platform in order to fertilize each other's activities. I'm not sure if you can say that in English. In order to assist each other in activism and work in that form. I used to live in one of those flats during the end of 2015. To the best of my recollection, we lived in that. We lived there, a group of 4 activists, and I appreciated the social cycle so much that when I ended my stay at that flat share, I thought to myself, we should either go home, or we should either go big or go home, and ended up settling for going both big and home with the founding of this apartment. This is a fairly large penthouse, basically here in the slums of South Tel Aviv. Behind me is the central bus station of Tel Aviv. Basically, this is one of the one of the most derelict areas of Israel. And what we do here since July 2015, which is when we began, we hold lectures here. And we also hold social events. As I told you, we are quite fond of socializing with each other. So we would occasionally have barbecues here on the roof. We also like to go to restaurants together and have events of that sort. We also have parties here and things of that sort. Also, another type of activity which is unique in Israel is we actually run a library, which means that people give us books and we lend them out, and that way people get to learn about liberty and economics. I would say that at the time being, we are the premier location for teaching Austrian school studies in Israel, which is not a very big achievement, since there is close to no activism related. There's close to no activism related to Austrian school in Israel at all. Actually, the fact of the matter is that Austrian school, even the most moderate economists, such as, and the most mainstream economists, such as Nobel Prize winner as a Nobel Prize winning economist Hayek, even economists as well known as him are fairly unknown in Israel, mostly not taught in mainstream economy, in mainstream economic studies in Israeli universities. So our plan is to indeed get more Israelis to know about the Austrian School of Economics. We would like more people to be aware of this fine method of economic research. What we do in order to promote this is we've had several lectures. Mostly all of the lectures that are given here and mostly all of the activity that is done here is in the Hebrew language. We've made this video in order to have a showcase, in order to receive acknowledgement from English-speaking institutes. I should point out here that we are not seeking in any way funding. We are not seeking any kind of we are not in any way trying to raise funds or to gather money that is required for the activism. Our activism requires no money. We are not looking for donations or anything of that sort, but we would like to get acknowledged by large foreign institutes that are well renowned in the subject of Austrian economics. We would like for people visiting Israel, libertarians visiting Israel, and even hopefully experts visiting Israel to give lectures in here about Austrian subjects, but also libertarianism and if possible also some moderate capitalist agendas. Even things, we are also friendly to things that are more moderate, not only Austrian studies. And what else? Just a few more things that I would like to point out. We've had lectures given here about Bombavak, which is probably one of the most well-known Austrian economists of the 19th century. We are planning to have a lecture in the upcoming weeks on Karl Menger, the father of Austrian economics, and after that we are also planning to have a lecture given on the subject of von Wieser, which is also an important Austrian economist. And basically, that's that. Today, we will be. I've been thinking of this idea of creating a showcase to portray our activism to English speakers for a while, and I have my good friend here, Mr. Gilad Sugarman, which is one of, I would like to, in my opinion, he's one of the premier intellectuals of Austrian thought in Israel. He's also a very fine person, and we were thinking of creating a showcase and thinking of what subject would be the best in order to portray the benefit that we can offer as an Israeli institution that handles the issue of Austrian economics. When I all of a sudden came across an article by a Ryan McMacken, which is a member of the Mises Institute. This McMacken wrote an article regarding the issue of mandatorily drafting women, which is something that is highly unusual in the world. There was, I'll be honest with you, I'm not really quite aware of the specifics, but I do understand that there was some kind of a discussion done in the American Senate in regards to trying to promote legislation to enable the American Army to draft women mandatorily, not to basically reinstitute draft and to also include females in that draft. Now, the reason I chose this subject is that Israel, as I said, is highly unusual in the way that we have a mandatory draft for women. And also McMacken's article that I read is also offers ideas related to the Israeli case and giving Israel as an example for the effects of drafting women. We have a history of drafting women, I would say, pretty much since the state was established, if I'm not mistaken, which is almost 70 years of mandatorily drafting women in a, I would say, culturally Western country. I wouldn't go as a fairly Western society in which we can use the lessons that we learned from these 70 years of drafting women by mandate, in order to give our give our view on this matter, and hopefully enrich people that are seeking to learn the effects of drafting women mandatorily, and then being able to learn from our experience as Israelis, because, as I said, we indeed have a very rare case in that matter. So with no further ado, I'd like to present my good friend and Austrian expert Gilad Sugarman, who will discuss the issue of the economic effects of drafting women from an Austrian perspective. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. The first lecture in the underground of Liberty Lectures here in southern Tel Aviv. I've known David since we met in the Freedom Con. Now a little more than a year ago.
It's
year and a half.
A year and a half ago.
Year and a halch ago. He approached me and we started talking about the ideas of liberty. I'm personally, as you can probably see, I'm an observant Jew, but it still does not stop me from believing in liberty, from casting doubt, which is what Austrian economics and people who believe in liberty do. We doubt the institutions, we doubt what we see, we doubt what we are told. It's the most fundamental idea of being a libertarian, is to doubt the authority, and basically ask, are we doing the right, constantly ask yourself, as society, are we behaving morally and are we behaving intelligently? It's both reason and morals and our moral compass that should guide us through life. And for me, David told the story how he got to be an activist. I came from a home which was not real libertarian. Both my parents worked for the state. My father is head of a very senior social worker in Israel for community service, which is, a community organizer like Barack Obama. In a way, so I came here through an intellectual way. I actually got to study expert too from Hayek as part of my philosophy studies in Hebrew University. I studied political science, philosophy, and economics, the PP program. And although that they really tried to make everyone into a socialist, and we used to read, and this is not a joke, Karl Marx on Fridays, they failed in my case, and quite a few others to my extreme joy, which shows that socialism always fails, even if they have 3 years of indoctrination. Eventually, they fail. So they failed, and I got more and more capitalist, and more and more pure, more and more committed to the ideas of liberty. The teaching of liberty is something that was a very small part of my studies. Not in economics. Economics obviously don't teach any Austrian economics at all. But a little bit you learn in philosophy, and as I had more time in between jobs and in all kinds of periods of my life, I got closer, and I stumbled upon, thanks to the great World Wide Web, on the Mises Institute website and quite a few Austrian blogs that have helped educate me. And I always ask myself, how can people really stay ignorant when all the data and all the philosophy, all the knowledge of the world is not locked in some vault in some stuffy basement in some monastery 10,000 kilometers from here, but just one click away. So, no one has the right, any excuse to be ignorant of economic ideas and of learning to do the right thing. So, let's talk about drafting. I'm sure everyone here would agree that drafting, everyone, it's a rule, men also, is a terrible idea. Yep. I personally was drafted. I don't know about some people here, I guess. I was in a combat unit in the Israeli army. And although it had its positive aspects, I still to this day resent the fact that I was drafted. I was not smart enough to resent the fact back in the day. But these days they say, why do you draft me? I'm still, I'm still the age that I'm called into reserve duty. So I'm actually going to be in the army again in a few weeks to be reminded of the wonderful experience that is the army, that's been ridiculed throughout literature, throughout time in great works like Catch-22 and others. So, conscription, drafting, a terrible idea. As I saw in the article written by McPack, and he discusses a bit the conscription, what Murray said that conscription is basically slavery, that you're taking against your will. You're not paid a salary, or you're paid some allowance, and you're taking against your will, and you have to follow orders against the threat of violence. So it's almost an extreme slavery, that ends at a certain period of time. It doesn't make it any less slavery. A lot of slaveries throughout the years were limited in their period of time. It could be you were sold because you were you stole from people, which actually I think is a better idea than just drafting people. So maybe you should be sold as a slave, because you need to give economic restitution to people who sold it. So maybe that's actually a good idea as opposed to just enslaving people to the armies. Slave armies were common throughout history. So conscription is a terrible idea. That's a tax. So before we go into the drafting women, just a few more words as my observation from a historical point as a Jew. Why do we have drafting? Then we'll go a bit in just the history of how it was done in Israel. and how it is, the whole glory of how it's done these days, and all the aspects, the economic aspects, and the other aspects it takes effect in our lives. So, in Jewish history, actually there was no draft. I'm talking about biblical times. So, so the people fought their way when they came to this country. And once they came to the land of Israel, the promised land, the army was disbanded. And each tribe was told to go mind his own business, defend himself against whoever needs it, and just try to make a living in a new land. And to that period of time, it's described the Book of Judges. There was no conscription. People had to, even when there was a tyrant or some occupier, whoever was the judge had to call upon volunteers in the name of God or some other way, or to try to convince people and to bring the people to fight for his cause, to expel the tyrant. So there was no, even though when there was a real immediate threat, still there was no conscription. If you remember, the Book of Judges ends when there's a civil war in the land of Israel, after an atrocity happens and one of the tribes commits a crime and kills the mistress of some traveler, and then there's they refuse to do justice, and it's a bit like the story in Sodom and Gomorrah that is told in the Book of Genesis. And then what happens is that they refuse to give the criminal. They say, oh no, there are people, right? Why should we give them away? So then the guy chops up his mistress into 12 pieces and sends the piece of the body, I don't know if it's through FedEx, it probably didn't smell well when it got wherever it got, and said, okay, here's the atrocity that happens, and the tribes gather, and there's a whole war, and eventually the tribe of Benjamin is decimated, and they end up having to forcefully give them women, and in order for them to actually survive, so they wouldn't disappear from the books of history. Now, fast forward a bit, there's the last judge, Samuel, and then next after him, the people, feeling the insecure because of Philistines, of Philistine, they say that they want a king. They're afraid. So, oddly enough, or the irony, or it's God's irony, he gives them a king from that decimated tribe. From that decimated tribe, from the tribe of Benjamin, which was a small tribe, and a full-out war decimated much more, so it was the smallest tribe of Israel, and he made that guy, that king. Now, think about it. Who was that first king? I'm sure there was psychological there were stories in family, there was some resentment. We're not told of this, but we can imagine what was the deal. And what was King Saul, the first action of the day? He took a bull, he cut it into 12 pieces, and sent it out to all the land of Israel, to all the tribes of Israel, in the same way that the guy recruited for the moral cause, he did it within the threat of violence. He said, okay, if you don't come to my army when I come calling, I'll rain terror upon you. I'll kill your cattle, or whatever. And that was the first king, and that was the first action. I don't think it's it's a way of the Bible giving us a message. It's not a coincidence that it's the same thing. It's the bull divided, the court divided, and they want, and they have the king because they're afraid, and they want to stop the wars. And if you remember what it says in the book of Samuel, that throughout Saul's years, they did not have one day of peace, and there was constant war. And notice actually the state of events, give or take, a few shorter periods in Solomon's days, etc., throughout time till the country fell apart. So there were constant wars, despite the conscription, or one could say due to conscription, and we know all the other stories that were involved in the war. Let's fast forward all the way to the 20th century. Let's not go to the whole second kingdom of Israel. That's a side point here. Israel, as David mentioned, has mandatory service for women since the establishment of the state, and that's true also of the mandatory service of men. Till the establishment of the state, Israel had quasi-military organizations There was
Militias?
the militias, the local militias, all the, you know, the Palmach, right? The brigade, the Palmach, the resistance against the two other resistance against the British, the Lehi, the Etzel. They were the underground. Of course, once the state was established, Israel, of course, was not established with a constitution and the right to form a militia and defend yourself against the tyrannical government. Government was actually very tyrannical when it started here. His first action was to disband all the competing companies or militias and bomb the hell out of everyone who didn't agree, more or less. There's a famous story of Altalena. People that were still there brought arms here and they were just bombed away. So, you know, to make a case that no one's allowed. We have a monopoly on power, and we dare you to mess with us. And that's the start of the IDF. Again, so that's it. That's a bit of history. Now, for the purpose of this lecture, I'll make two assumptions that I'm not 100% behind, and that I don't completely support, but let's assume. First of all, that we recognize the fact that we should have a state, and the state has certain given roles, and the state should have a monopoly on power and the army. And in addition, something else that I'm sure most people will agree here, that Israel actually needs a defense force. We don't live in the middle of some continent. We're actually attacked here. We actually have enemies that might kill us. So it would be a good idea to have some kind of military force. So those are the pieces. So as it said, Israel started with mandatory service for women. And before in the very early years, and during the independence war of Israel, and before that, women played significant part in the defense forces of Israel. Now it made a lot of sense because there were very few people here, less than 500,000. We had a lot of enemies, and they were attacked from multiple fronts, and people were actually defending their homes when fighting in the front lines. Some of the front lines were actually just outside the window. So it made a lot of sense that women were part of the military activities. Again, they volunteered for military activities before the establishment of the state in Israel, both in the resistance and in the Palmach. And it continued after that. In the years following, the state grew, and but still, and to this day, it was not abolished. We still have a draft removed. We seem to take pride with just visiting the website of the idea of this today, and said the first sentence, but we're proud to be the one state that drafts women. So I guess that's not shaming them is not actually going to happen. So, as pointed out, the conscription is really problematic for everyone. So, what's the case for drafting women? The case for drafting women, as article by Mike Macken, and as is constantly mentioned in the non-stop debates in Israel regarding military service, that debates that also revolve around the drafting of the ultra-Orthodox communities and other communities and pacifists or everyone else that does not want to participate in the draft, is that it's a matter of equality, right? It's a big word. We must be equal. We must be equal. There has to be equality before the law. It has to be equality for everyone. Everyone has to be treated the same. So, again, I want to talk specifically about the case of Israel. Let's think about the Israeli army. We know that people who serve in the army are not, their military service is not equal at all to the others in any way. I was a combat soldier. I spent 3 years and running around with a gun and sitting in the dark waiting for terrorists to come and other fun activities. Sitting in the rain or in a pile of mud. And A guy who was my roommate in college went to a computer unit and spent his days in a very nice room acquiring skills that are demanded in the market as opposed to running around. And he didn't get the chance to bang up his knees and all other fun stuff. So talking about equality seems a little crazy. It's more than that. We know that people drafted all kinds of places. We know that people get choice where to go. Some people have connections. So the whole equality thing is foolish. Besides, the equality thing, if we agree, and we do, that drafting isn't a good idea, and I think there's some in Israeli society that would agree that drafting is not such a grand idea in any case, then why would we want to draft others? The whole idea that by socialists, by the left, by whoever, it always claims that in the name of equality, we should do that. So it's like the equality in taxes. So if I'm punched in the face, you should be punched in the face too. Right, but we're both hurting, so what's the point? No, let's draft everyone. Let's draft everyone into the army. So the same thing happens here. We know that the army doesn't even need all these people, but we're drafting anyone. Now, let's talk about drafting women into the army of combat. This part is even the most delusional part, and unfortunately, it continues to grow to this day due to all kinds of trends that are not only local here to Israel, the feminist trends that see this as some grand equality. Again, it goes to equality thing, that we should draft women into combat service. Drafting women into combat service, and again, it's drafting. It's not if we had a professional military and that could choose, is even worse than the political trends to push women into the professional army that we saw in the United States Army, and it has a lot. It's just an insane idea. Statistics have shown throughout the last few years that women, because that's the reality, tend to be injured much more. Women have matchless stamina than men. They get more tired, not able to build the strength. They get injured and have all kinds of health problems 4 to 5 times more. They have fractures, hairline fractures, knee problems, and also unique problems that are unique to the biology of women that are caused by the military experience, which again, it's a tough experience. I can say from experience also. It's tough on a guy too, and the average guy is obviously much stronger than the average woman. So drafting women into combat service is crazy, but still we try to push it, and we know that mixed units. We're talking about, again, this is the Israeli case. There are mixed units now, the Israeli army of combat soldiers. We know and remember, although I think all the people here are not 18 years old, but much older, that 18-year-olds are not very, very experienced, are not always to right, extremely rash, hormones are raging, and other issues that happen. You're not, very light. They take you're 18 because, you'd run into the enemy fire without thinking about your kids at home because, you don't give a lot of thought. So having that type is bound and is shown to have all kinds of conflicts, sexual conflicts, all kinds of issues that I'm sure everyone can imagine what they are. Sexual harassment, entanglement, and all, again, we're talking about kids. This country takes young people to the army. This is a country that drafts the men. Again, a terrible idea, but drafting women is even worse because it enhances most of the problems. And drafting into combat is actually crazy, and it hinders the performance, and it hinders the other soldiers. And not only that, it has you probably know that the army spends a significant amount of its budget on dealing with families of wounded, of rehabilitation. I know all this from personal experience, not for me, thank God, although I did bang up my knee in the army, but because my sister was a senior officer in the army in what's called the rehabilitation division of the army, and this is a significant amount. It's something like 8% of the total military budget. Adding more women to those numbers is economically insane, regardless of the stupidity of drafting men. It's just crazy. And the fact it's done, it's happening these days, has horrible costs and has costs on society for later on. So that's in combat. So, okay, say, fine. So how about non-combat? We know for a fact, everyone here who was in the Army knows that the Army has a tremendous amount of waste, especially in the non-combat units. In the combat units, we need a number of people to rotate, to go on guard duty, to not to be tired, to rush the enemy because you know some of your friends you will be shot, so you need some kind of numbers, you know, all the terrible statistics of war. But especially in the but even there, the Army doesn't use the combat soldiers in a very smart way. Again, because they are conscripted, because they aren't paid a salary, because it's not an enterprise, because they don't think like capitalists, they don't have no economic calculation. So bringing more women into the non-military is adding a group of personnel that you're very limited in where you can deploy them, and to jobs that probably not needed. If you saw in the publication for this lecture, there's a picture of when this general is speaking, and there are 3 women soldiers kneeling before him with the microphone in a very unflattering and somewhat disturbing picture, because they all work in the military radio, which only exists in dictatorships and in Israel. So we take these women, and there was, and everyone knows this in the country, there was a film released the other year. It's called Zero and Personal Relationships, or with People Skills. I'm not sure how they can translate into English. Which made fun of this, which showed the futility of a couple of women working not that far from here, if I remember, in one of the big army bases, and they're not doing anything that's not worth anything, and it's actually having this added personnel that you draft into the army is a waste, and stands in the way of technological advancements. Maybe we'll have a robot prepare the coffee for the general, if he needs that in the morning.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but just for the recording's sake, if you don't mind mentioning the name of the movie for reference, is Zero Motivation, just for people to view it.
Okay, so it's not a direct translation of the name in Hebrew. It's called Zero Motivation. It should be very funny. I didn't get a chance yet to see it. It's still on my
highly recommended.
Right. I should. I read all the fun things that make fun of the army. So definitely all the satire things. We're good with the recording.
Yeah, we're good.
Right. Okay. So that's not non-combat. All right. Well, Israel, as I'm not sure. The one of the funny things, it was mentioned in the article that what happens when you draft women, you might be tempted to start using them for more civilian causes. Well, right. Israel has also what's called a national service that is also expanding extremely unfortunately. The national service is some quasi-state thing. I'm not even sure how to characterize it, because it's very odd. It's run. I just looked it up early today to see I have the right number. Currently, the National Civil Service or Civilian Service, or whatever the hell they call it these days, has deploys about 17,000 people, which is a lot, and doing all kinds of odd things. They're all they're not directly working for the state. It's not like the army. It's on eight
branches?
It's 8 amutot, 8 associations, NGOs with various names. Each has its own political affiliation where it deploys the people. One is the more religious one is the modern Orthodox, two organizations. One is the left wing's one. They're opening an Arab. It's the whole thing, and they do they do all kinds of stuff. For example, we have soldier teachers. Again, something that in every other state would have been considered an insanity. We have that. They guide tourists all over the country.
Yes.
Some even, and I envy them a bit. I have to say this because while I was sitting in a ditch, get to fly abroad and then go to some Jewish community and spend a year there and abroad, as part of their national service. And that's considered more or less the same. You went to have fun, and I was thrown in the ditch. Yay for equality, right? Pay me a salary, more. So, it does. You won't believe the kinds of stuff that is done into this whole civil service. It's actually, and there's no way, and we shouldn't deny this, it's another way of enhancing the welfare state. Every single thing that the civil service whatnot does, in national service, which has their slogan playing on the radio nonstop, the National Civilian Service, your way of contributing to society. Of course, the socialists always confuse society with the state. They make a point of always doing it. So you keep hearing their slogan as they're expanding their army of welfare. It's not enough that they have paid. They also have a slave army of welfare. And that's the welfare state, and it does all kinds of things that, stick to teachers, and it's recruited to all kinds of causes. There's their work in education institutions. They're covering the shortages in the special ed. Each is assigned one of those. And the amount of fact that you're using personnel that are not trained for this job and are young and have no idea how to do it, and putting this 19-year-old in high school with 16-year-olds, and it's insane. I even heard a few weeks, it was a couple of months ago, I'm sure that it didn't seem that they're doing it just yet, but we might. They're going to have, they suggested in order to help lonely elderly men, to have women bosom warmers or something like that. This is actually a thing. They said that it will be assigned a national service woman to these old guys. So I don't know, that sounds a bit like an escort service to me. And besides, they have a bit of a problem, because if you weren't so stupid, they would remember that most of the men die by that age. It's the women that are alive, so they need men escorts or whatever, which would be very, very awkward. But I don't know, maybe that's going to happen as well. So it's an expansion of the welfare state, and it can be used and is utilized in everything possible. As a matter of fact, it's used now to cover all kinds of, it's used to cover the consequences of really other stupid things. For example, we all know about again, this is the state of Israel, and one of the things here that we're unfortunately not moving towards freedom is the education system that is being, for some reason, nationalized again. The preschoolers, 3 to 3, 4, which was more or less quasi-private, has been, for all purposes, nationalized. And now they find out, okay, we nationalized the service. Everyone's coming here. We don't have for all the kids. We have 40 kids, and you have two kindergarten teachers take care of them. Okay, so let's put a national service woman there. It's a solution for every other stupid thing, right? So that's the army of welfare that's expanding and expanding, and you can see the army of welfare crowding out all kinds of legitimate things. It's not only that; it's the it causes another issue, which is it's expanding the welfare state to a place which it's already the welfare state by its very nature is destroying voluntarism and helping out in your community. It's replaced by national service. Instead of communities looking out for their elderly, we'll have bosom warmers. Instead of people taking care of their parents, volunteering in class, it's all being used. And again, this is not fantasy. Other countries should be warned that this is what happens when you give the option. And it's all portrayed as this some grand thing. Well, okay, now you're a pacifist. You don't want to serve the army. Great, we found a solution for you. You're an ultra-Orthodox? Fine, we'll find you a cushy thing. You'll do some shenanigan. Oh, you're politically connected. Don't worry. We'll put you up to a cushy job. And obviously, all these things cost money. We don't know how much, obviously. There's no way to know how much. We know what the allowance they're paid. We know that the state rents apartment to all this welfare army. They have to rent apartments for them, and they get higher salary than soldiers. But the actual cost, we have no idea, right? We have no idea what's putting out of job did someone who could have filled the teachers, or if they could do something productive instead of doing this shenanigan. We don't know. So the economic calculation here is like, and always when the state gets involved, all the numbers get lost, and we can just assume a lot is lost of what could be done. So that's the nationalizing of the service and the civic duty and the indoctrination. It's really unfortunate because it essentially tells you, okay, this is how you take care of your society. We round up the people, we establish them into groups, and we divide them across the country, and obviously we do whatever we do with them. And again, this is obviously also true for the regular army. The regular army, because if we're talking about covering for stupid decisions, the fact that there's a draft brings a lot of people that shouldn't be in the army into the army. People that should take care of their families, and they're stuck in the army and they can't make a salary or get some whatever to help. The army is paying people now a few hundred shekels, 1,000 shekels, 900 shekels, unless so the army employs social workers, which have another name. It's called Terms of Service Non-Commissioned Officer. Doesn't translate very well. But it's basically the social worker that's like a regular social worker, supposed to give you goodies from the state, or in this case the army, in order to allow you to make a living. So that's really great. You should just release the guy and let him work. But no, we bring anyone in, and then we spend more money and try to solve the problems that we created. So that's the same thing as the welfare state in the way that we cover you, because there's no consequences. We cover everything by force and all the consequences of these decisions.
If you could just, the figures, if you can just quote them in US dollars instead of shekels. You mentioned the salaries.
I'm not sure. Salary, I think combat soldiers are paid something like $300 these days.
Yes.
Give or take. Non-combats are paid like $180.
Per month.
Per month. That's not money when you consider you work 24 hours a day, and if you're a combat soldier, are risking your life. You know, it's not money. It's some kind of joke. Of course, then they need to compensate you, so we won't be extremely bitter, so they give you some allowance at the end, and this and that, and they become kinds of, again, find ways that cost a ton of money to compensate for the stupid decision of drafting everyone and paying them peanuts. So, you know, a circle of stupidity that feeds itself, and that is how it is. And as I said, the national service, the welfare state army is actually paid more because they're also paid rent, and there's all kinds of ways. They get compensation here, and some of them work not on the books, and it's a whole semi-corrupt thing. That's not to talk about the whole corruption that everyone knows that is revolving around these 8 organizations. All kinds of salaries that people are drawing on the state subsidy, and which no one wants to talk about, because actually every one of the political factions get their fair share there. So why would you do it? You know. So that's the civil service. So I'm calling upon all the states. Please be warned. This is a horrible idea. Don't let it stop. Exactly like the income tax started with 1%, and you said, okay, we can live with that. It will start with one person, and it will turn into a monster Godzilla that will eat your state. So, be warned. So, that is the case of Israel. We have, unfortunately, the service is expanding. It's 70,000, probably more. State is very proud to expand the numbers. they're thinking about doing another insane thing about the drafting. They constantly want to draft to cap and make shorter the term of time than where men serve. Again, it's an extremely stupid idea. What organization would train people for 2-3 years and then fire those people? It's just absurd. And what they want to do now is the army obviously always says that they have a shortage, so they want to, and this is happening in these days, they want to expand the service of women to be 32 months, equal to the service of men, to compensate for those months that it's in there. The fact that they're not doing the same thing, so they want to bring you to combat service. So again, really stupid. And the fact that it costs more to train, that they can't do the same thing, they have problems, is beside the point. Because, right, we're all for equality. It will be equal 32 months from each. Yay, we will have bad soldiers that actually need to defend this country from its enemies. We have non-made-up enemies in this country as opposed to all kinds of other countries. We have real people that want to kill us. So you'd want your army to be as good as possible. You'd want not to waste your resources on creating a welfare army when you need a good regular army that should be a professional army. And so that's the Israeli case. And not yet bearing good news here. Hopefully we will. And well, that's my case. I'm calling upon all societies, please object to drafting of women. It's a terrible idea, even more terrible than from an economic point of view, from the drafting of men. It enables other stupidities. Don't start with it. It's a slippery slope. It never ends.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Okay, so I thought I'll say a few things that I wanted to add on this fine lecture by my good friend Gilad. Again, I would like to speak about Israel's specific case, less in regards to drafting women, but more and more just about the general idea of conscription and how it's practiced in Israel and how it's influenced. I'll start off by telling about my personal experience. I spent my service initially, I got drafted as a combatant, like my good friend Gilad here. And over time I found that this line of service was not suitable for me, and I found myself navigating through bureaucracy and found my way to becoming a logistics sergeant in the Air Force, which is essentially a non-job. As mentioned by Gilad, you have to understand, again, I'd like to tell you a bit about how conscription works in Israel. So what happens in Israel is that the Israeli army essentially drafts every man and woman who finish high school. And when these people are drafted...
they are not Arabs.
Yes, if they are not Arabs. Also, ultra-Orthodox are typically not... drafted as well. It's a process that the Israeli army is trying that the Israeli government is trying to force upon. The addition of drafting ultra-Orthodox soldiers is a process that the Israeli government has been planning for about 20 years and trying to force it upon the Israeli army.
Today it was cancelled.
Excuse me?
Today it was cancelled.
Yes, it seems every time it seems like there are some stops in the station, but
Everything's a joke.
Yes, so it seems that over time this plan is suggested every time and then delayed or stopped. And yeah, so as I said, also it should be considered that religious non-ultra-Orthodox women also are not drafted and typically would serve in this civic service that Gilad mentioned. Now,
again, if it's their choice, they can say, I'm too religious to serve in the army.
Yes.
Like my sister, she's also observant, served in the army. So it really depends. It's sort of I choose to say I'm too religious for the army as opposed to, we saw that, and it's a whole...
Exactly. So what I would like to speak of, as I said before, are things more of the things that are related to the specific case of Israel, not specifically to women. As I said, so what happens is that every single graduate of high school is drafted. They are not paid a salary. They are paid between $150 and $300 per month in exchange for their service. which they are forced to perform, of course. And what we see here is a relatively unusual situation in which a government organization has a virtually unlimited resource, because we all know the amount of expenses that the Israeli government spends on education, and we all know how much the Israeli government spends on healthcare, and we also know how much the Israeli government spends in cash on the issue of defense. But what none of us know is the amount, is the value of having these people withdrawn from their lives as civilians, as people who are operating in the market, and essentially putting them in a situation in which they are not productive, mostly are not productive at all, and some of them are moderately productive. And I can tell you from my specific experience is that what you see is, as I said, just the thing that's unique about the way we draft is that we draft every single high school graduate. So that means if 1 year 10,000 people finish high school, and for instance we know that this year is let's say a relatively peaceful year for us, they will draft the 10,000. But if on the following year there will be 40,000 people finishing high school, and it's a fairly, let's say, even more peaceful year than the one before, they will still be having, the Israeli army still has the same draft quota. That means that there is, the resource that is given to the Israeli army is virtually unlimited. They get every single person that finishes high school, and then the army's job, once this person is drafted, is in fact to find a job for him. And now another aspect of, another effect of this method is that the Israeli army becomes an institution that has to work in terms that are suitable for virtually any person. So that means that if you look at the demands, at the jobs that are created in the Israeli army, these are jobs that are supposed to be suited, I mean, for instance, if you'd like to be a soldier, there are certain demands of you. You have to be in certain physical shape, you have to be in a certain mental condition. But we find that in Israel, because of the fact that the Israeli army is mandated to draft every single person, the jobs themselves become oriented towards every single person. So in Israel, for instance, one of the things that was very amusing to me is we had the dining rooms in the Air Force, and we used to have ramps, wheelchair accessible ramps for dining rooms. So that means that the dining rooms for the Israeli armies were adapted to people that are not physically capable of walking. So that means that even walking becomes...
and that's a bit of a cream, because the army would not draft him, but the army
volunteered.
Right, the army is forced to take the volunteer.
It's true, but still, that was a very clear example for a situation of physical shape. But we have to look at the situation of... but I think the point even more worthy of considering is the fact, is the mental aspect. Because what we see in Israel is, in fact, the demands of the disciplinary demands of soldiers are becoming the disciplinary demands not of an army, but the disciplinary demands of some kind of something that is between a high school and a summer camp. The soldiers have very low requirements, because if they would put high requirements, then if the army would choose high requirements as far as the discipline, we would find that many of the soldiers that are drafted are simply not fit. And then when they would be punished for their lack of discipline, the military service would become increasingly more and more difficult. And they would either find themselves out of the army in all sorts of ways, or they might also harm themselves, which is another issue. Israel, another issue with the Israeli army and with the defense spending in general is that there's it's under secrecy. There are a lot of these very basic, a lot of this very basic information that we need in order to consider the effects of conscription are simply hidden from us. For instance, if there is a situation in which a soldier ends his life, which is something that is something that happens in all armies, in all modern armies. In the Israeli army, for instance, this information would be hidden. The army does have to report how many soldiers died per year, and then they would show that some of them died in road accidents, and some of them were killed in duty, and some of them were killed in training, and some of them were killed in the gray zone, in which the army does not have to report the cause of death. So from all sorts of these data collection systems that have been used in Israel, we found that at times of peace, for instance, in the last conflict in Gaza, there was a certain incident in which a rocket hit a group of soldiers at one location, and several dozens of them were lost. But we find that in normal years that have no major conflicts during that period, we find that the main cause of death in the Israeli army is gray deaths. Situation in which casualties in which the army does not give specific information as far as the cause. So and this is something that I can say from my service, both as a combatant and both as a non-combatant. The commanders in the Israeli army, as far as discipline and as far as how difficult the training can be in non-voluntary units, find themselves in situation that they are constantly needing to lower the bar as far as requires of discipline, requires of being able to fight in combat in order to keep the soldiers in the units. So that means they get a bunch of 18-year-olds that did not show in any way any willingness or want towards drafting in a combatant unit. Of course, the demands of the training are very, very high, both physically and mentally. We find that a lot of soldiers, mostly during training and in combatant unit, quite a few of them end up harming themselves. So as an effect from that, the standards keep getting lower and lower and lower in order to facilitate this draft that is implemented in Israel. So that's from the combatant point of view. Now, from the non-combatant point of view, we also find ourselves the army also finds itself in a situation in which it has very low motivated people. Obviously, you're going to have much lower the people that are in non-combatant service in Israel are even even less motivated than the soldiers serving in combatant units. In these units is again a situation in which the army is meant to facilitate this draft and make up positions that are basically meant to
fill their time.
That are meant to suit people with very low motivation, lack of skills. Some of them are due to their lack of cooperation with the army itself. Okay, the pizza is here. Due to lack of cooperation with the army itself, find themselves untrained. They don't complete their courses, or they leave the courses in the middle, and this is and in this situation, these jobs start appearing. These jobs, such as mine. I was, as I said, I was a logistics sergeant. My daily routine was as following. I served in a faraway base in the far south. Please help yourselves to pizza. And I found myself waking up every day at 8 a.m., heading off to the office, sitting in the office doing nothing up to midday. At midday, we would go for lunch at the dining room. We'd have some food, and once we'd get back, I would basically I would be given a group of soldiers in training, and I would give them all sorts of these odd jobs just meant to keep them busy. It was either cleaning the base, collecting cigarette butts, all sorts of these completely useless jobs. And what happens is, over time, because Israel really has been running the draft for so long, over time these situations become normal to us as Israelis. We think that it's normal for an 18-year-old for an 18-year-old to go off to a place in which he basically does nothing all day, completely unproductive, and do that for 3 years without getting a salary, being reliant on his parents. And this is basically what I did, and I can tell you from my personal experience, and that this is something very, very common in the Israeli army.
I'm sure the army gave you a certificate, said that you did a great
Yes.
and very, very important job
Yes,
when you
yes.
were released.
Yes.
Right? Of course.
Yes, they did.
And meaningful. And without you, everything would have fallen apart.
Right, and one last thing that I would want to discuss are the terms of release from the Israeli army. I should note that, no, first of all, I'd like to speak about the idea of leaving the service, of stopping your service abruptly during your mandatory service, which is, I have to say quite honestly, quite easy. If you go through the psychiatric process, you go to a psychiatrist and you basically put on a show and you get discharged from the army.
The number 25, 30%.
21. How many of the soldiers? I don't know.
They were listed, I think it's like 30%, maybe more, that started military service and not complete their term. I think it's
okay.
over
So that's one option, and I should say that it's fairly easy, luckily for us. So that's one option of leaving the army. Of course, if you find...
I would like to add that because of many people trying to fake their mental shape in order
Yes.
to get released from the army underestimates real mental problems.
Yes. Okay, so I'd like to really, just for the recording's sake, to repeat what you just said. It was said here from an audience member that the army itself, because there is a lot of requirement for psychiatric services from soldiers with low motivation, they find the psychiatrists in the army find that they are skeptic in situation in which soldiers really do need
That's
psychiatric.
also true of medical conditions
Then
as well. It's
my
quite
next point
common.
exactly. We have in Israel
I personally experienced it. I can tell you that I got some kind of infection in the army, and I didn't feel well, and it was again, I was in a combat unit. It's my experience obviously very different, and I went home, right? But even when you went home, you can't go to
Regular
a
doctor.
civilian doctor.
Yeah.
You're property of the army. You
Okay.
only can go to that. So okay, but even though I was 18-year-old, my parents were somewhat skeptic of the system. So we went to our neighbor who was a doctor, who was chief of some department of the said, look, this looks like a serious infection. He circled the infection that got my leg. He said, if it gets more than that, you should get real treatment. So I went the other way to the next day. It didn't go away. So I went to the doctor, the army doctor. Anyway, waited there in some odd place, some Russian butcher for like an hour and a half. And then he said, whatever, and gave me a 2 days leave. I wasn't leave in any case. And after that, you have to go back to the army. But he said, look, you probably should go take these pills. Fortunately, he was not allowed to give those pills. He had to send me to the hospital to go get the pills. When I got to the hospital, the doctors there looked at me. The nurse looked at me and said, you're not going anywhere. And 10 minutes later, I was with an IV in my vein. And
Right.
I spent the next 3 days hospitalized, and I was on leave for another 2.5 weeks due to infection.
Right.
And the guy wanted to send me home, and that's extremely common.
Yes, right. So as Gilad mentioned, I would like to speak about the medical services. As I said, the Israeli army finds itself in a situation in which it needs to have relations with very low motivated soldiers over long periods of time, and therefore the soldiers are inclined to go to medical doctors and fake medical situation, or even inflict upon themselves medical situations in order to get days leave and etc. So a good example of that is in Israel. We've had the services, some of the medical services of the army. There used to be an army infirmary, and over time they started providing these services by private medical establishments. And you would go there at Saturday night. It's called a doctor visit. It's about 1 kilometer away from here. You would go there on a Saturday night, and you see the room is packed with these 20 and 18-year-olds that don't want to go to the army on Sunday.
I remember when I was a
They
medic.
were all tested and were found healthy just a year ago.
Yes.
They are all perfectly healthy.
When I was a medic, the day before you have to stay in, for weekend in the army.
Right. Everyone has
always,
medical issues.
always somebody would wake me up in the night saying having an asthma
Attack.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so this is briefly as far as the medical treatment in the Israeli army. The last point that I wanted to address is an issue of economic miscalculation, because I do want to give this a bit of an Austrian perspective. A good example of this is the fact that the Israeli soldiers, they get this very low salary, and for every salary that they get paid, there is also a salary set aside for them in some kind of a savings system. Now that money is collected to a certain fund, and they get that money when they are discharged. And so as I said, for instance, you would get $150 every month as your salary, then you would have another $150 saved aside. And then there's a third sum of about, I think, half a salary each month, which is sent into a specific account. And then you, at the end of your service, you would get a voucher that you can use this only for certain purposes.
The other way around, that's the bigger amount.
Yes,
The
it's the bigger
picador
amount.
is the bigger amount.
Okay, so I'm sorry. So
The manak,
Okay, so I'm
the
sorry.
bonus for releasing from the army
Right.
would be
Okay,
like
okay.
a few salaries,
Right,
and
right,
that
right,
was
right,
the
right,
bigger.
right. Okay,
And
so
it's actually a real number now. Not a lot of money, but
yes,
it's a
right.
number.
So he's right. I'll reverse it. Okay, so as I said, it's $150 each month. Half of it another half of it is sent to your account that you get immediately when you are discharged, and then another amount similar to $150 per each month that you serve is also saved in an account in the side that you can only use once you are discharged, but only for certain purposes. These purposes include education. They include the grant that you get if you get married. You also get a grant in case that you buy a house
Or start a business.
And we see that these educational purposes cause a misallocation of funds, because we see that soldiers are looking for places to waste their money, to spend their money once their service is over, and the money goes to all sorts of places that it's really not supposed to. It's inflating the academic bubble in Israel, for example. Now there's also a discussion about sending them to giving them 1 year of free academic education in addition, which means, and this of course in only in certain areas of the country, in order to encourage people
to help the university go bankrupt.
Right. Yes.
Yeah,
so basically, what we're
just the other
doing.
day, we heard the university, Hebrew University, which got very good ratings at last ratings.
They're at the
universities,
verge of bankruptcy.
on the verge of bankruptcy,
Right.
because of tensions, obviously.
Right. So yeah. So Israel actually has the second highest percentage of academic graduates in the Western world, and we have a raging academic bubble going on, and this method of funding soldiers' education in this way is just something that even contributes to this bubble more. Of course, I don't want to elaborate on the issue of academic bubbles and how they work, but you're more than welcome to check this issue yourself. The last thing that I do want to mention is soldiers are also encouraged to participate in high priority positions, which means that if they go to work in agriculture, if they go to work in tourism, in construction, gas stations. Anyway, there's a few of these very unattractive jobs. If the soldiers go to work at these positions, they get an extra grant from the state. And of course, it should be mentioned that Israel at the time being has the lowest unemployment level in its history. So we're busy paying people grants to work in these demeaning jobs, at least in their opinion. Or let's say, demeaning is not the right word, let's say unattractive jobs. and this in a situation in which we really do have the very lowest unemployment rate in our country's history. And basically that's just what I wanted to add to Gilad's lecture, and thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you.
All right.